These are not mere philosophical questions. They are the seeds of transformation, waiting for your courage and intention to nurture them into bloom. Let us walk together through the ways fear, when embraced, becomes a profound teacher. A guide leading you toward deeper understanding and a more authentic existence. The truth I have come to know is this: meaning does not lie beyond fear. It lives within the dance between fear and freedom, uncertainty and hope, darkness and light. This dance is the very heartbeat of our humanity. And in this rhythm, we find what it truly means to live, not merely to survive, but to thrive. To embrace this dance is to accept that fear will accompany you, but it need not control you. It calls you to presence, courage, and ultimately to freedom. I ask you again, will you allow fear to dictate the limits of your life? Or will you step forward and claim your freedom to choose meaning? Fear is not the enemy I once thought it to be. It is the messenger of my own values, the sentinel guarding the threshold of what matters most. When I feel its grip tighten around my heart, I am reminded of the preciousness of life and the urgency to live meaningfully. I've walked through the darkest valleys of despair, yet it was in those moments, trembling before the uncertainty of tomorrow, that I discovered the extraordinary power of choice. The choice to find meaning, even when all else seemed lost. This freedom to choose my attitude in any given circumstance became my salvation. It reminded me that external events, no matter how harrowing, could not steal the inner sanctuary of my spirit. To live authentically is to embrace this freedom, to meet fear not with resistance, but with openness. To say, yes, I am afraid, but I will not be defined by this fear. In this acceptance, fear loses its power to paralyze. It becomes a catalyst, a fire that refines and strengthens the soul. I invite you now to reflect on the fears that hold you back. What would happen if you welcomed them as teachers rather than enemies? What new paths might open if you stepped forward despite your trembling? Meaning reveals itself most clearly when we choose courage over comfort, presence over avoidance. It is forged in the willingness to face life's uncertainties with an open heart. Remember, the fear of tomorrow does not diminish your capacity for joy, love, or purpose. It magnifies them, calling you to live more fully, to love more deeply, to engage more honestly. This is the paradox of our existence, that in the midst of fear lies the invitation to freedom. Freedom to create meaning, freedom to transform suffering into growth, freedom to live with profound authenticity. I encourage you to take this freedom into your own hands, to walk boldly into the unknown, carrying the torch of meaning as your guide. Because in the end, it is not the absence of fear that defines us, but the courage to live despite it. And that courage, your courage, is the truest measure of a life well lived. I have often asked myself, why does fear of tomorrow feel so heavy? Why does the mere thought of an uncertain horizon tighten the chest and cloud the mind? And through years of reflection and suffering, I have realized something essential. Fear is not a weight meant to crush us, but a signal, pointing toward the places where meaning is waiting to be born. In every moment I faced uncertainty. Whether in the silence of a dark night or amidst the noise of suffering, I discovered the same truth. My life was not defined by what happened to me, but by the stance I chose to take. My freedom, though invisible to others, remained intact even when everything tangible had been stripped away. This freedom is not a luxury. It is the essence of being human. It is the space where meaning lives. It is where I decide not whether life will hurt me, because it will, but whether that hurt will be wasted or transformed. Each day I remind myself, fear is not a barrier, but a threshold. When I lean toward it, I discover new layers of my strength, my love, my purpose. When I run from it, I only build walls around my own soul. I want you to ask yourself, what is it that your fear is truly pointing toward? Beneath the surface, is it a desire to protect what you value? Is it a reminder of the finite nature of your time, urging you to live with greater urgency and intention? Do not curse your fear. Listen to it. Hold it in your hands and ask what it is trying to teach you. For in its whispers, there is often a call to love, to create, to act, to rise. I have learned that meaning does not come when life is easy. It arrives when life tests us, when the ground beneath us feels uncertain, when tomorrow feels distant and dark. Meaning emerges because we dare to ask, even in the midst of doubt. What can I give? What can I create? How can I live so that this moment, this day, this life is not wasted? And when we choose to live by that question, fear begins to soften, not because it disappears, but because it becomes part of something greater. It becomes the spark that lights the torch we carry through the unknown. This is how I have learned to live, not by seeking a life without fear, but by seeking a life so full of meaning that fear no longer has the final word. Each time I felt fear pulling at the edges of my thoughts, I asked myself, what does this fear demand of me? Not in the sense of surrendering to it, but in the sense of understanding it. Fear, I realized, is not an enemy to be silenced, but a messenger to be heard. It speaks to the very heart of what we cherish, what we risk losing, and what we are called to defend. In the stillness of my own reflection, I began to see that the fear of tomorrow is rarely about tomorrow itself. It is about the uncertainty of who I will be when that moment arrives. Will I have the courage to meet what comes? Will I remain steadfast to the values I claim to hold? Or will I let the unknown dictate the terms of my existence? These questions haunted me, but they also shaped me. They forced me to understand that meaning is not given. It must be chosen, forged, and renewed each day. And this choosing, though it does not erase fear, transforms it into something bearable, even purposeful. I have stood in moments where all that was familiar fell away, where the horizon was nothing but a void. Yet, in those moments, when everything external felt uncertain, one truth remained. I still had the freedom to decide how I would respond. That freedom was my last possession, and it was enough to keep me alive, not merely in body, but in spirit. And so, I began to see fear not as a prison, but as a doorway. It reminded me that life is fragile, that every breath is a gift, and that each day asks something of me. To love despite the risk of loss, to act despite the possibility of failure, and to hope despite the certainty of suffering. I want you to feel this as I have felt it. The fear you carry about tomorrow is not proof of weakness. It is proof that you care, that you are alive, that you have something to fight for. Let it remind you of your capacity to rise, not just to endure, but to create, to choose, to live. Meaning, I have found, is the only force powerful enough to quiet fear, not by eliminating it, but by giving it a place within the story of your life. Fear then becomes not the villain, but the tension that makes the story worth telling. So when you feel it again, do not run. Do not bury it beneath distractions or empty reassurances. Stand with it, let it speak, and then answer it, not with panic, but with purpose. For it is in that dialogue, that sacred exchange between fear and meaning, that your life takes on its deepest shape. I have learned that when I face the fear of tomorrow, it is not the future itself that threatens me, but the uncertainty of my own strength to meet it. This is why fear feels so heavy. It carries not just the shadow of what may come, but the doubt of whether I can endure, adapt, and remain true to myself when it arrives. But every time I have been tested, I discovered a truth that changed me. The strength to endure is not something I had to wait for. It emerged the moment I chose to act, despite my trembling. Courage, I realized, is not the absence of fear, but the decision that fear will not dictate my life. When I understood this, my relationship with the unknown began to change. The future no longer stood before me as an impenetrable wall, but as an open landscape, filled not just with dangers, but also with possibilities. Fear was still present, but it was no longer the master of my choices. I began to see that fear was trying to teach me something essential. That life is not meant to be controlled, but embraced. That the fragility of tomorrow is not a curse, but a reminder to live today with intention, to hold nothing back, and to shape meaning out of every fleeting hour. This realization brought me a strange peace. Not a peace built on the illusion that everything will be safe, but a peace rooted in the knowledge that no matter what comes, I can still choose how I will live. I can still choose to love, to give, to find purpose even in suffering. And so I ask you, when fear whispers that tomorrow is uncertain, will you let it paralyze you, or will you let it remind you of what is worth living for? Will you shrink back from life, or will you rise to meet it? knowing that the unknown holds not only pain, but the possibility of transformation. Each day, I choose to let fear sharpen my focus rather than close my heart. I let it remind me that time is limited, that people I love will not be here forever, and that my own life is but a breath in the great expanse of time. And instead of despairing, I let this truth push me deeper into life, not away from it. For it is only when we stand close to the edge of uncertainty that we truly grasp the value of each moment, each connection, each breath. Fear of tomorrow, when understood, becomes not a chain but a call to live today as if it truly matters. Because it does. I know well how easily fear can consume a person, how it creeps into the quiet moments and fills the silence with visions of everything that could go wrong, how it whispers that perhaps it is better not to try, not to hope, not to risk, because in risking you open yourself to loss. But I also know this. When I listened too long to those whispers, I began to wither. My life shrank into safe corners, into waiting rooms where I thought I could escape pain. Yet it was in those corners, in that false safety, that I felt the deepest emptiness. I realized that a life free of risk is not a life at all. To be human is to step willingly into uncertainty, to dare to hope even when the outcome is unknown, and to continue creating meaning even when tomorrow is veiled in shadow. There were moments when I too wanted to retreat, to wait until I felt no fear before I moved forward. But I learned that such a day never comes. Fear is not something to outgrow or eliminate. It is something to walk with. The moment I accepted that fear would travel with me, I stopped waiting for permission to live. I began to act, not because I felt safe, but because meaning mattered more than comfort. And something extraordinary happened. Though fear remained, it no longer ruled me. I began to see the hidden gift fear carries. It awakens us. It stirs us from the sleep of routine and demands that we pay attention to what truly matters. It asks us to confront questions most would rather avoid. What do I value more than my own comfort? What am I willing to risk for a life that feels truly alive? It is through these questions that I found clarity. Not clarity about the future. I never had that. But clarity about myself. And with that came a quiet courage, not loud or fearless, but steady and enduring. That is what I want you to understand. Courage is not an emotion, it is a decision. It is the choice to keep moving, to keep loving, to keep building, even when the ground beneath you trembles. And when you choose this, the fear of tomorrow begins to shift. It does not disappear, but it loses its sharpness. It becomes instead a reminder that each day matters, that each day is a chance to create something lasting. Something that even uncertainty cannot erase. So I ask you now, will you let fear hold you back, or will you walk with it and discover the depth of your own strength? Will you let the unknown control you, or will you allow it to reveal who you truly are? Because life will not wait, and meaning, though it asks much of us, offers something far greater in return. The ability to live fully, even when tomorrow is uncertain. Every time I stood before an uncertain tomorrow, I felt the instinct to cling to routines, to certainties, to anything that might offer the illusion of control. But life, I came to understand, does not reward those who cling. It invites those who are willing to let go, to surrender not in defeat, but in trust that meaning can be built even in the shifting sands of uncertainty. It was in the moments when I loosened my grip that I discovered something unexpected. The future is not my enemy. The unknown is not a threat, but a canvas. Fear only painted it black because I had not yet begun to add my own colors. When I stopped asking what will happen to me, and began asking what will I make of what happens, my life changed. My suffering did not end, nor did my fear vanish, but I began to feel free, not because I controlled my destiny, but because I chose my response to it. And that, I realized, is where true strength is found. Not in knowing the future, but in knowing that whatever comes, I will not surrender my freedom to create meaning. I want you to know this same freedom, because perhaps your fear of tomorrow has less to do with the events that await you and more to do with the question of who you will be when those events arrive. Will you be a victim of circumstance, or will you be the one who chooses, again and again, to live with purpose, to turn even suffering into something that speaks of hope? This is not easy. It is a choice made one moment at a time, often in the quiet where no one is watching. But it is in those unseen choices that a life of depth is formed. The fear of tomorrow, if you let it, can show you what matters most. It can remind you that the people you love will not always be here, that time is fragile, and that every conversation, every embrace, every breath is a gift. And when you see life in this way, fear begins to serve you. It sharpens your awareness. It urges you to forgive, to speak the words you have been holding back, to take the step you have delayed for too long. In this way, fear does not shrink your world. It expands it. It forces you to live as though each moment counts, because it does. I have lived through days when tomorrow felt like a threat I could not face. Yet even then, I found that meaning was not a distant treasure, but something I could choose in each breath, each decision, each act of courage. And because of that, I learned to live, not by banishing fear, but by walking beside it, allowing it to guide me toward what truly matters. And so I ask you, will you continue to see your fear as an obstacle, or will you let it be the very force that awakens you? Will you run from the unknown, or will you use it to carve a life so full of meaning that fear becomes only a shadow, not your master? The choice, as always, is yours. There was a time when I believed that the fear of tomorrow was something to be conquered, something to be silenced entirely. I thought that if I could only think the right thoughts, build the right plans, or hold tightly enough to my hopes, the fear would vanish and peace would finally come. But I was wrong. Peace does not come from eliminating fear. It comes from learning how to live alongside it without letting it consume the heart. I discovered that when I stopped fighting fear as if it were my enemy, it began to reveal its lessons. Fear taught me to see the fragility of life with clarity. It showed me how easy it is to waste days waiting for a future that may never arrive, instead of fully inhabiting the present moment that is already here. It reminded me again and again that time is not guaranteed, and that because it is finite, it must be cherished. There were mornings when the weight of uncertainty pressed down so heavily that it felt as though the future itself was a storm cloud looming over me. But in those very moments I found my greatest strength, because when everything external seemed fragile, I remembered the one thing that could not be taken from me: my freedom to choose the meaning I would give to my experience. That freedom became the anchor that kept me steady, even when the winds of fear threatened to pull me apart, and I began to ask myself a different question, not, how do I escape this fear, but, what is this fear showing me about the life I truly wish to live? Often, the answers were uncomfortable. They revealed where I had been settling for a life of safety rather than one of purpose. They showed me the conversations I had been avoiding, the dreams I had buried, and the ways I had been waiting for tomorrow instead of living today. Every answer became a call to act, not grand gestures, but simple choices. To speak words of love while there was still time, to take a step toward a dream even while trembling, to forgive where bitterness had lingered, and to live in such a way that, no matter what tomorrow brought, I could say I had not wasted the day I was given. It is not easy to live this way. To live fully is to accept that fear will accompany you, whispering of uncertainty and loss. But I have learned to listen without surrendering, to hear its warnings, to honor what it reveals, and then to choose again and again to act in spite of fear. When met with courage, becomes a teacher rather than a jailer. It sharpens our awareness, focuses our energy, and reminds us that the moments we have are not to be squandered. It pushes us to rise, not because we feel unafraid, but because meaning calls us louder than fear can. And this is what I want for you to understand. You do not have to wait for fear to disappear before you live. You do not have to wait until you feel certain before you take a step. Life is too brief, too precious, to wait for the day when all doubt is gone. I have walked through shadows darker than I ever imagined, yet I have found a strange gift within them. Fear, while painful, became the force that reminded me that every breath is an opportunity. Every day is a page, waiting to be written with choices that reflect not my fear, but my purpose. So I ask you, when fear of tomorrow rises again, and it will, what will you do with it? Will you let it keep you frozen, waiting for a perfect certainty that will never come? Or will you allow it to remind you of the urgency of now, and step forward anyway? Because in the end, life is not asking us to be fearless. It is asking us to be willing, to risk, to love, to create, and to live so that even fear itself becomes proof, not of weakness, but of the depth with which we cared. And perhaps that is the true meaning behind the fear of tomorrow. It is not here to paralyze you. It is here to wake you. The fear of tomorrow is not a curse but a compass. I see this now with a clarity I once lacked. It points me, again and again, toward the places in my life where I am called to grow, to love, to release, to begin. Without it, I might drift endlessly in comfort, unaware of how much of my life remains unlived. I remember nights when uncertainty sat heavy in my chest, nights when I wondered if the morning would bring answers or only more questions. I felt the pull to hide, to distract myself, to pretend the fear wasn't there. But each time I tried to silence it, the emptiness only grew louder. It was only when I finally turned toward the fear and asked, "What are you here to teach me?" that my life began to shift. Fear taught me that I was still alive, that my heart still longed for something, still cared deeply enough to tremble at the thought of losing it. And that realization, strange as it may seem, brought gratitude. Because only the living feel fear. Only those who dare to hope can be shaken by the possibility of loss. When I began to see fear as a sign of my aliveness rather than a threat, something softened within me. I no longer felt the need to crush it. Instead, I let it walk beside me, not as a friend, but as a reminder. A reminder that what I do with today matters, precisely because tomorrow is not promised. And in that space, I began to choose differently. I stopped waiting for perfect certainty before I acted. I spoke the words I had been holding back, even when my voice shook. I began the work I had delayed, even knowing it might fail. I loved more freely, knowing that love is always a risk. This, I believe, is where true meaning is born. Not in the absence of fear, but in the courage to keep living fully, even when fear whispers that the future is unknown. Because life has never promised us certainty, but it has always offered us the chance to create purpose out of what is given. Every person I have met who truly lived, not just existed but lived, shared one common thread. They acted in the presence of fear, not its absence. They understood that meaning cannot wait until life feels safe. It must be forged in the very moments when life feels most fragile. And so, I ask you now, as I have asked myself countless times, what will you do with your fear? Will you spend your days trying to escape it, numbing yourself, shrinking your life until it feels manageable? Or will you use it as the signpost it truly is, pointing you toward the very things that make life worth living? I can tell you from my own experience that the latter path, while not easy, is the only one that leads to true fulfillment. Because every time I chose to walk with fear instead of away from it, I found meaning waiting for me on the other side. Not always in the form I expected, but always in a way that deepened my life. Tomorrow will always carry its shadows, but those shadows do not need to be prisons. They can be invitations to speak, to act, to love, to forgive, to create, and to live as though each day is both your first and your last. When we live this way, fear loses its sharpest edge. It becomes less of a weight and more of a reminder that we are still in the game, still capable of shaping a story that matters even in uncertainty. So when you feel that familiar chill of tomorrow's uncertainty, pause. Do not run. Ask it what it is pointing you toward. Listen. And then, with whatever courage you can summon, take the step that fear has been trying to show you. Because fear, when understood, is not here to destroy you. It is here to wake you up. I have come to understand that the fear of tomorrow is not something to be eradicated, but something to be embraced as part of the fabric of life. For it is only when we feel the weight of the unknown pressing upon us that we are truly called to awaken, to live not as spectators but as participants in the unfolding of our own story. Each time fear arises, I remind myself, it is not a signal that I am broken, but a signal that I am awake. It reminds me that I am still invested in life, still capable of being moved, still willing to care. For only those who care deeply enough to risk loss ever feel the full trembling of fear. There were moments in my life when I thought I could wait it out, wait for the fear to pass before I dared to act, to love, to build. But those moments only taught me one thing: life does not wait, and meaning cannot be postponed. If I am to live authentically, I must choose now, not later, to walk with fear and still take the steps that call to me. I began to see fear as a threshold, not a wall. Beyond that threshold lies the life I am meant to live, but I cannot reach it if I remain frozen at the doorway. I must step through, trembling if necessary, but stepping nonetheless. In those moments when tomorrow felt darkest, when the weight of uncertainty threatened to crush me, I would ask myself a question that became my compass. What can I give to this moment despite my fear? The answer was rarely grand, but it was always enough to move me forward. Sometimes it was as simple as offering a word of kindness, even when I felt empty. Sometimes it was choosing to forgive, even while hurting. Sometimes it was daring to begin a task that felt impossible, trusting that the first step would reveal the next. And each time I discovered something miraculous, my fear did not vanish, but it no longer owned me. By acting, even in small ways, I reclaimed my freedom. I reminded myself that I was not a prisoner of my circumstances, nor of my anxieties. I was a creator of meaning, even in uncertainty. This is what I want you to know. Courage does not feel like courage in the moment. It feels like shaking hands, a pounding heart, and 1,000 questions about whether you can endure. But it is precisely in those moments, when you act despite the fear, that your life begins to expand. Fear, when carried with purpose, becomes a strange kind of ally. It sharpens your sense of time, makes your priorities clearer, and pushes you to stop waiting for a life free of risk. It tells you, in its own cryptic way, that now is the time to live as though your days are numbered, because they are. I do not say this to burden you, but to awaken you. For when you truly understand that your days are finite, every moment becomes richer, every connection becomes deeper, every breath feels like a chance to live, not merely to exist. And in this awareness, fear no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like a guide, pointing you back to what matters most. The people you love, the values you hold, the legacy you wish to leave. So the next time you feel the fear of tomorrow tightening around you, do not curse it. Do not hide from it. Ask what it is trying to show you. Let it remind you that life is fleeting, and that this fleetingness is not a reason to despair, but a reason to live with all the intensity, love, and purpose you can summon. For it is only when we walk with fear, not away from it, that we discover the fullness of our humanity. When I reflect on my own journey, I see clearly that the fear of tomorrow was never truly about events themselves. It was about the part of me that longed for certainty, the part that believed life could only be lived once every risk was erased. But life, I learned, is not found in the safety of what we already know. It begins in the unknown, where we are forced to trust, to act, and to grow. Each time I tried to wait for the fear to fade before moving forward, I found that my life began to shrink. The world grew smaller, my choices narrower, until I realized I was no longer living but merely existing, surviving on borrowed time while my soul starved for purpose. It was only when I began to walk directly into the tension of fear, to carry it with me rather than push it away, that my life opened again. I discovered that courage is not a sudden surge of confidence. It is the quiet decision to take one step, even when your heart trembles and your thoughts scream for retreat. In these steps, I uncovered a profound truth. Fear can either chain us to a life of hesitation or propel us toward a life of meaning. The choice depends not on the fear itself, but on the stance we choose in its presence. I asked myself, and now I ask you, when you feel that tightening in your chest, when tomorrow feels like a looming shadow, will you allow that shadow to dictate the shape of your days? Or will you decide, despite its weight, to write a life that speaks of courage, of love, of purpose, even in uncertainty? For it is in uncertainty that life shows its true depth. It strips away illusions and asks us to see what we value most. It reminds us that comfort is not the same as fulfillment, and that the life worth living is rarely the easiest one. I remember nights staring into darkness, wondering if hope was still possible. In those moments, I found that meaning was not a distant treasure I had to wait for. It was something I could choose, even then. I could choose to give, to forgive, to speak, to love, to take one small action that aligned with the kind of person I wished to be. And that choice, though small, became a light bright enough to guide me through the next hour, and then the next. This, I believe, is how we overcome the fear of tomorrow. Not by silencing it, not by pretending it isn't there, but by using it as a compass, by letting it show us what truly matters, and then daring to live for those things, even when the outcome is uncertain. Meaning is born not when life feels safe, but when we understand that our time is finite and still choose to live boldly. It is forged in the moments when we act, not because we feel fearless, but because we refuse to let fear be the author of our lives. And in this way, the fear of tomorrow ceases to be a curse. It becomes a teacher, one that urges us to live each day as though it were both our first and our last, because in truth, it could be either. So I tell you, as I have told myself countless times, walk forward. Carry your fear if you must, but do not let it hold the pen that writes your story. Choose meaning instead. Choose to live now, while there is still time to love, to build, to leave something behind that fear itself can never touch. For it is only in this choice that we discover what it truly means to be alive. There is a subtle truth I learned through suffering, one that many resist because it feels almost unbearable at first. The fear of tomorrow is not something to be conquered by force, nor is it something to be erased by sheer will. It must be understood, honored, and transformed. Only then can it lose its power to rule us. When I tried to silence fear, through distraction, denial, or false reassurances, it grew louder in the quiet hours of the night. But when I sat with it, when I asked it why it had come, I realized it was pointing toward something sacred. It reminded me of the fragility of those I loved, of the brevity of time, of the urgency to live authentically before the clock ran out. This is why I no longer despise fear. I see it now as a teacher, albeit a harsh one. It does not arrive to comfort, but to awaken. It does not flatter us, but shakes us until we remember that the world owes us nothing. Not another day, not another moment, and that our only true wealth lies in what we choose to do with the time we have. When I embraced this perspective, I stopped waiting for life to feel safe. I began to live as if each day were both a beginning and an ending, as though I had nothing guaranteed beyond the breath in my lungs. And paradoxically, in doing so, I found a freedom deeper than any safety I had ever sought. Because freedom, I realized, is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to keep choosing meaning in spite of fear. It is the ability to look at an uncertain tomorrow and still say, I will live fully today. I know this is not easy. It is far simpler to numb ourselves, to bury our dread beneath constant noise, endless work, or shallow distractions. But those escapes are illusions. They keep us busy, but they cannot fill the quiet ache within us. Only by facing the fear, by walking with it rather than away from it, can we truly transform it into a force for growth. Each time fear whispers to me now, I listen. I ask what it is guarding, what it wants me to see. Often, the answer is uncomfortable. A dream I have delayed because failure feels unbearable. A relationship I have neglected because vulnerability feels risky. A truth I have avoided because it might demand change. But it is in facing these things that life regains its depth. For when I follow the thread of my fear, it often leads me directly to the places where meaning is waiting to be found. And so I invite you to ask yourself, what is your fear of tomorrow truly pointing toward? Beneath the surface, what truth is it urging you to face? Perhaps it is not a threat, but a call to step into the life you have long postponed, to forgive, to risk, to create, to love more deeply than you ever have before. Because fear, though it feels like a shadow, often reveals where the light is needed most. And if you can learn to walk with it, to let it sharpen your awareness rather than shrink your world, you will discover that tomorrow, no matter how uncertain, holds not just anxiety, but the possibility of transformation. The unknown is not your enemy. It is the field where the seeds of your most meaningful life are waiting to be sown. I have come to believe that the fear of tomorrow is one of life's most profound teachers. It forces us to confront our vulnerability, our limitations, and yet, paradoxically, it also invites us into the deepest parts of our strength. For it is in the face of uncertainty that we are given the choice to become more fully ourselves, to live not by the scripts handed down to us, but by the truths we find within. There were times when I feared that the unknown would consume me, that the weight of what might come would crush my spirit. But I discovered that spirit is not a fragile thing. It is resilient, shaped not by the absence of hardship, but by how we respond to it. Each day I chose to face the unknown, I reclaimed a piece of my freedom. I remembered that no one can take from me the decision about how to meet life's challenges. That freedom to choose, even when everything else is stripped away, became my lifeline. I want you to hold on to this truth. You are never completely powerless. The future may be unclear, the path may be fraught with obstacles, but your response is always yours to choose. And in that choice lies the root of meaning. When fear presses down upon you, try to see it as a signpost rather than a barrier. It points to what matters most, what you love, what you hope for, what you are willing to risk. It asks you to decide who you will be, not tomorrow, but today. I have found that living this way is neither simple nor easy. It demands courage that feels like weakness at times, and hope that feels like a whisper in a storm. But it is the only way to truly live. The fear of tomorrow will not disappear, but it can become a companion, guiding you to live with greater clarity and purpose. When you embrace it, it pushes you to live each moment with intention, to speak honestly, to love deeply, to create meaning out of even the smallest acts. And in doing so, you transform your fear from a source of paralysis into a catalyst for growth. It reminds you that your time is limited, and so every choice, every word, every action counts. So I ask you now, will you let fear of tomorrow shrink your world? Or will you let it expand your capacity to live fully? Will you allow it to chain you to hesitation? Or will you let it free you into a life of purpose? The choice is yours, and it is in that choice that your meaning is found. In my experience, the fear of tomorrow often masks a deeper question. A question about identity, about who we are when all that is certain fades away. It asks us, who will you be when the world shifts beneath your feet? Will you hold on to hope, or will you let despair claim you? Will you seek meaning, or will you succumb to emptiness? I have wrestled with these questions in the darkest of times, and though the answers were never easy, the very act of wrestling became a path to growth. To ask these questions is to refuse to live passively. It is to engage with life fully, even when the path is unclear. Fear demands presence. It pulls us out of complacency and forces us to confront what truly matters. It challenges us to find meaning not in the absence of hardship, but in the face of it. When tomorrow feels like a vast unknown, I remind myself that the future is not a place we arrive at, but something we create with each choice today. The small acts of courage, the decisions to love, to forgive, to hope. These are the seeds from which a meaningful future grows. I have seen that when we surrender to fear, when we let it dictate our lives, meaning slips away. But when we stand with fear, when we hold it gently and choose to act despite it, meaning returns. It returns not as a distant ideal, but as a lived reality, a light in the darkness that guides us forward. I invite you now to consider this. What would your life look like if you refused to let the fear of tomorrow hold you back? What doors might open if you chose, moment by moment, to live with courage and purpose? This is no simple task. It is a lifelong commitment, but it is the only path I know to a life truly worth living. Remember, courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important. And for me, that something else has always been meaning. The deep, unshakable sense that my life, no matter how uncertain the future, has purpose. So when fear comes knocking, as it surely will, greet it as a messenger. Listen carefully. And then choose. Choose to live. Choose to love. Choose to create meaning in the face of the unknown. Because in that choice lies our greatest strength. I have often thought about the paradox of fear and meaning. Fear seems to threaten everything we hold dear, yet it can become the very soil in which meaning takes root. Without the shadow of fear, joy loses its brightness. Without the weight of uncertainty, hope can feel hollow. In moments when tomorrow loomed like an abyss, I found that what anchored me was not certainty but commitment. Commitment to the values that gave my life direction. Commitment to the love that filled my heart. Commitment to the idea that no matter what happens, I could choose how to respond. This commitment was not always easy. Sometimes it demanded that I face my deepest pain, that I sit with loss and grief, that I carry on when every part of me wanted to give up. But in those struggles I discovered something profound. Meaning is not a luxury for the comfortable. It is a necessity for the broken. It is the light that guides us through darkness, the hand that pulls us from despair, the song that reminds us we are still alive. And so I urge you, do not run from your fear of tomorrow. Do not hide it beneath busyness or denial. Instead, bring it into the light. Speak to it honestly. Ask it what it has to teach you. When we do this, we open ourselves to transformation. We move from being victims of circumstance to architects of our destiny. We find that the fear of tomorrow, while still present, no longer controls us. I have seen this truth reflected in countless lives. People who, despite facing unimaginable uncertainty, choose every day to find meaning. They become beacons of hope, not because their lives are easy, but because their courage shines through the fear. You can be one of those people. You do not need to wait until the future is clear. You do not need to be free of fear. You only need to decide that meaning matters more than fear. And in that decision, you will find a power greater than any anxiety about tomorrow. I have come to understand that meaning is not something bestowed upon us from the outside, nor is it a prize to be won. It is a commitment we make each day, especially when the path ahead is unclear and fear looms large. When tomorrow feels like an abyss, the temptation is to retreat, to protect ourselves by shrinking the boundaries of our lives. But I have found that the true act of courage is to expand our boundaries instead. To lean into the unknown and find there the opportunity to create something deeply human and profoundly lasting. Fear reminds us that we are alive. Alive in our vulnerability, alive in our longing, alive in our capacity to love and to suffer. It is a reminder that life is precious precisely because it is fragile and fleeting. I ask you now, will you allow your fear of tomorrow to be a prison, or will you make it a doorway? Will you let it silence your voice, or will you let it sharpen your song? Because the future is not given to us. It is shaped by the choices we make today, by the courage we summon, by the love we offer, by the meaning we create out of our struggles. I have learned that in the face of fear, we discover what we truly value. We see who we are beneath the masks we wear and what we are willing to stand for. And in that discovery lies freedom. Freedom not from fear, but freedom through it. So, when you wake to the uncertainty of tomorrow, breathe deeply and remember, your meaning is waiting for you in this very moment. It is not lost. It has not fled. It is here within your reach, ready to be claimed by the one person who can give it. You. In facing the fear of tomorrow, I often return to a simple yet profound realization. It is not the future itself that holds power over us, but our relationship to it. When we see the unknown as a threat, our hearts tighten and our lives contract. But when we choose to meet uncertainty with openness, our lives expand and meaning unfolds. This choice is never easy. It demands from us a willingness to be vulnerable, to stand in the tension of not knowing, and to keep walking forward, step by trembling step. But it is in this space of uncertainty that the deepest human qualities emerge. Courage, love, hope, and resilience. I have learned that fear can become a bridge rather than a barrier. A bridge that connects us to the parts of ourselves and the world that we might otherwise overlook. It draws our attention to what is truly important, urging us to live more authentically and with greater purpose. And yet, the question remains, how do we cultivate this openness in the face of overwhelming fear? How do we keep moving when the road ahead is shrouded in darkness? For me, the answer has always been found in meaning. When we root ourselves in a purpose greater than ourselves, whether that is love for others, the pursuit of truth, or the commitment to growth, we find the strength to endure. Meaning becomes the light that guides us through the fog. It does not promise a life without pain or loss, but it assures us that our suffering is not in vain, that through our responses, through our choices, we participate in something larger than the immediate moment. We weave our individual stories into the tapestry of humanity. In the moments when fear feels most suffocating, I remind myself that I am not alone. Countless others have faced the unknown before me, and countless others will face it after. This shared human experience is a source of profound connection and solidarity. Knowing this, I find comfort and strength. I find the courage to greet each new day, not with resignation, but with intention. To say, though I do not know what tomorrow holds, I will meet it with meaning. And so I invite you, the reader, to join me in this commitment, to see fear not as a stopping point, but as an invitation. To walk forward, carrying your fear not as a burden, but as a reminder of your humanity and your capacity for meaning. Because in this journey, you are never truly lost. You are always moving toward the life you were meant to live. A life shaped not by the absence of fear, but by the presence of meaning. I have come to see that the fear of tomorrow is like a shadow cast by the light of our deepest desires. It appears most clearly when we yearn for something meaningful, something that calls us beyond the mundane. This shadow, though daunting, serves as a signpost, pointing us toward the values and commitments that give our lives purpose. In moments of uncertainty, it is tempting to turn away from the shadow, to seek refuge in certainty, routine, or distraction. Yet I have learned that true freedom comes not from escaping fear, but from embracing it as a companion on the journey. This embrace does not mean surrendering to despair. Rather, it means acknowledging the fragility of life while affirming our capacity to respond with courage and love. It is the paradox of human existence, to be vulnerable and strong, uncertain yet purposeful. Each day I remind myself that the future is not a distant place, but a series of choices made in the present. It is here in these moments that I can choose meaning. I can choose to act in ways that reflect who I want to be, even when the path is unclear. I encourage you to see your own fear of tomorrow in this light. Let it be a mirror reflecting your deepest longings and your capacity for growth. Let it challenge you to live more fully, love more deeply, and create meaning in the face of the unknown. This is not an easy path. It requires patience, compassion, and relentless hope. But it is the only path that leads to a life of authenticity and fulfillment. When fear arises, do not fight it alone. Reach out to others, to the world, to the inner resources you possess. Find strength and connection and purpose in your commitments. Remember, the fear of tomorrow is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of a journey toward greater self-understanding and meaning. And in this journey, you will discover a wellspring of resilience and courage that can carry you through even the darkest nights. So walk forward step by step, with your fear as a guide and meaning as your destination. The fear of tomorrow is a veil that obscures the vast possibilities held within the unknown. Yet, it is within this very veil that the essence of human existence is revealed, our capacity to find meaning despite uncertainty. I have come to understand that life's greatest gifts are often concealed behind the shadows of fear. In the darkest moments when hope seems a distant memory, I remind myself that the presence of fear indicates a life engaged with its own significance. To feel fear is to acknowledge the preciousness of what might be lost. The relationships, the dreams, the moments that make life worth living. This realization transformed my relationship with fear. Rather than an adversary to be conquered, it became a companion that urged me to live with greater intentionality. Fear became a signal pointing me toward the values I hold most dear. In these moments, I choose not to retreat, but to engage fully. I embrace the discomfort of uncertainty as the fertile ground where meaning can flourish. It is here that I find the courage to love more deeply, to forgive more readily, to act more boldly. The fear of tomorrow, once paralyzing, now serves as a reminder that life is fragile and fleeting, and that every moment holds the potential for transformation. It calls me to presence, to awareness, to a deep appreciation of the gift that is today. I invite you to consider your own fear of the future, not as a barrier, but as a doorway. It challenges you to step beyond comfort and certainty into the realm of growth and discovery. This journey is not without hardship. It demands resilience and the willingness to face discomfort. But it also offers profound reward, the discovery of a life imbued with meaning that transcends circumstance. As you walk this path, remember that you are not alone. We are bound together by the shared human experience of facing the unknown. In this solidarity, there is strength and hope. May your fear of tomorrow be transformed from a source of despair into a catalyst for awakening. May it lead you to live each day with courage, intention, and a heart open to the richness of existence. For in embracing the uncertainty of tomorrow, we find the true measure of our freedom. The freedom to create meaning, even when the future is uncertain. There is a profound irony in the human condition. We fear the uncertainty of tomorrow, yet it is this very uncertainty that breathes life into our existence. Without the unknown, there would be no adventure, no growth, no discovery. Life would be a monotonous echo of days past, devoid of meaning. I have walked through shadows darker than most can imagine. I have felt the chill of despair when the future seemed nothing but an endless void. Yet it was precisely in those moments that I found the flicker of light, a spark of meaning that refused to be extinguished. This spark, I realized, is our greatest treasure. It is the ember of hope, the flame of purpose, the beacon that guides us through the night. It is not dependent on circumstances, but on the choices we make in the face of those circumstances. When fear threatens to overwhelm, I remind myself that I am not defined by my emotions, but by my responses. Fear is a visitor, a messenger. It arrives to alert me to what I care about, to what is at stake, and it challenges me to choose courage over retreat, meaning over despair. I urge you to see fear in this way, not as an enemy, but as a signpost. A signpost pointing toward the values, the loves, the dreams that give your life depth. When you embrace fear as a guide, you reclaim your power. You become the author of your story, rather than its victim. Living with this awareness changes everything. It allows us to face each day not with resignation, but with intention, to see every moment as an opportunity to create meaning, no matter how small. Meaning is not found in grand gestures alone, but in the quiet acts of love, kindness, and courage. It is woven into the fabric of everyday life, waiting for us to notice and honor it. So when you feel the fear of tomorrow closing in, pause, take a breath. Remember that you hold the power to choose how you respond. Choose to step forward. Choose to live with meaning. In doing so, you will find that even the darkest nights can give way to dawn. That fear, once tamed, can become the very thing that fuels your journey. I have often pondered the strange relationship we have with time, how the future, with all its uncertainty, can both terrify and inspire us. The fear of tomorrow is a shadow cast by our hopes, a reminder that what we desire most also carries the risk of loss. But it is precisely this risk that gives our lives urgency and meaning. When I was in prison, the days blurred into one another, and the future seemed a cruel joke, an unreachable promise. Yet, even in the bleakest moments, I found that meaning could be born from the smallest acts. A kind word, a silent prayer, the memory of a loved one. These moments anchored me, reminding me that no matter how uncertain tomorrow was, today still held meaning. This insight, I believe, is the key to transforming fear into courage. To live fully, we must accept that we cannot control what comes next, but we can control how we meet it. We can choose to face each day with intention, to seek meaning not in the absence of fear, but alongside it. Fear often whispers that we are alone in our struggle, but this is an illusion. We are connected through our shared humanity, through our capacity to suffer, to hope, to love. Recognizing this connection can be a profound source of strength, a reminder that we are not isolated islands, but part of a vast and enduring tapestry. In this understanding, I found freedom. Freedom not from fear, but freedom through it. The freedom to live authentically, to love deeply, and to create meaning, even when the path is unclear. I invite you now to reflect. What meaning awaits you on the other side of your fear? What life might you build if you embraced uncertainty as a teacher rather than an enemy? This journey is not easy, nor is it quick. It requires patience, courage, and an unwavering commitment to choose meaning each day. But it is the only path to a life truly lived. So, when tomorrow feels daunting, remember, your response is your power. Your meaning is your light. And in this, you hold the key to your own liberation. I have often found that the fear of tomorrow acts as a mirror, reflecting not only our anxieties, but also our deepest desires. It reveals what we truly care about, what we hope to protect, and what we dream to achieve. This mirror can be unsettling, for it shows us parts of ourselves we might prefer to avoid, our vulnerabilities, our doubts, our unfinished stories. Yet, it is precisely by facing this reflection that we begin to understand the essence of our humanity. We realize that to be human is to live with uncertainty, to carry hope and fear side by side, and to find meaning in the interplay between the two. When I was in the camps, I saw people who, despite unimaginable suffering, clung to meaning with fierce determination. They found purpose in the smallest acts. A shared smile, a whispered prayer, a memory of home. These moments of connection and intention created islands of meaning in a sea of despair. From their example, I learned that meaning is not something distant or abstract. It is lived in the present, forged in the crucible of experience and sustained by our choices. So, when you feel overwhelmed by the fear of what tomorrow might bring, I invite you to pause and ask, what can I do now that aligns with my deepest values? What small step can I take today to build a life of meaning despite uncertainty? In this way, fear becomes not a wall but a doorway, a passage into a richer, more authentic existence. Remember, courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. And meaning is the compass that guides us through the unknown, illuminating the path when all else is dark. Your journey toward meaning is uniquely yours, shaped by your experiences, your choices, and your willingness to face the unknown. Embrace it fully, with all its challenges and gifts, and know that in doing so you join a lineage of seekers, those who have walked before you and those who will walk after, all united by the shared quest to find purpose in the face of uncertainty. The weight of the unknown often feels like a heavy fog, obscuring our vision and clouding our hearts. But within that fog lies a paradox. It is both a barrier and a gateway. The fear that grips us can either imprison us or invite us to discover a deeper freedom. I have come to understand that true freedom is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it, the ability to hold fear gently, to acknowledge it without surrendering to it, and to continue moving forward despite it. When I was stripped of everything I once held dear, when tomorrow was nothing but a vague hope, I realized that my power lay not in controlling my circumstances, but in controlling my attitude toward them. This shift in perspective was transformative. It allowed me to find meaning even in suffering, to recognize that life's value is not measured by comfort or certainty, but by the courage to face whatever comes with an open heart. I ask you now, what if you could view your fear of tomorrow not as a threat, but as a guide? What if that fear could teach you about your deepest values and ignite your resolve to live fully? This is the invitation that the fear of tomorrow extends to each of us. It calls us to live deliberately, to embrace the present moment, and to create meaning through our choices. In doing so, we transcend the paralysis that fear often brings. We reclaim our agency and step into the flow of life with intention. I encourage you to listen closely to your fear, hear what it has to say, and then, with courage and clarity, choose a response that aligns with your highest self. This is the path to a life of meaning, a life where fear is not an enemy, but a catalyst for growth. Remember, the journey is yours alone, but you are never truly alone on it. The human spirit is resilient and connected, bound by the shared experience of facing the unknown. May you find strength in this connection and courage in your own capacity to choose meaning every day. As I look back on my life and the countless souls I have encountered on this journey, I am reminded of a profound truth. The fear of tomorrow is universal, but the response to it is deeply personal. It is the choice to engage with fear, to transform it from a source of paralysis into a source of empowerment, that defines the path toward meaning. Each of us carries a unique story, a tapestry woven with threads of joy and sorrow, hope and despair, certainty and doubt. Fear, when faced honestly, can reveal the patterns within this tapestry, the values we hold dear, the dreams we nurture, the wounds we seek to heal. I have found that embracing fear requires radical honesty. It means acknowledging our vulnerabilities without shame, facing our limitations without defeat, and holding space for our doubts without despair. In doing so, we create a fertile ground where meaning can take root and flourish. We discover that meaning is not an external prize, but an internal commitment, a decision to live with authenticity, courage, and love, regardless of the uncertainties that lie ahead. This commitment does not promise a life free from hardship, but it offers a lifeline, a beacon that guides us through the darkest nights and into the dawn of possibility. I invite you now to make this commitment, to see your fear of tomorrow not as a signal to retreat, but as an invitation to step forward with purpose, to recognize that your response to fear is a testament to your humanity and your strength, and to know that in choosing meaning you participate in a timeless dance, a dance of resilience, hope, and transcendence that connects all who have walked this path before you and all who will walk it after. The fear of tomorrow is a shadow cast by the human soul, a reminder that we are finite beings navigating an infinite mystery. It is a silent question whispered in the stillness of night. What lies beyond this moment? What awaits me when the sun rises again? This question can evoke dread, but it can also spark awakening, for in its very uncertainty lies the essence of life's call. To live not in fear, but in the pursuit of meaning. I have often reflected that our suffering is not without purpose. Pain, loss, and fear carve deep channels within us. And through these channels, meaning flows. It is not the absence of hardship that grants meaning, but the courage to face it and to find something worthwhile within it. In the depths of despair, I discovered that meaning is a choice, an act of will that transcends circumstance. Even when stripped of freedom, of dignity, of hope, I could choose how to respond. I could choose to find meaning in the smallest of things. A shared smile, a memory, a prayer. This choice is not easy, and it is not always immediate. It requires patience, resilience, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. But it is the only true path to freedom. I invite you now to consider your own fear of tomorrow. What does it reveal about your deepest values? What opportunities for growth does it conceal? Fear asks us to confront the truth of our existence, that life is fragile, fleeting, and uncertain. But it also offers the chance to affirm life, to choose meaning despite uncertainty, to create purpose amid chaos. When I faced the horrors of the camps, I realized that those who survived were not the strongest physically, but those who held on to meaning. They found a reason to live beyond the immediate pain, whether love for family, faith in a higher purpose, or commitment to a future beyond their present suffering. This realization transformed my understanding of human resilience. It is meaning that sustains us even when all else fails. So I urge you, do not run from your fear of tomorrow. Face it with honesty and courage. Let it guide you to what truly matters. Allow it to deepen your appreciation for the present moment, for the connections you hold, and for the potential within you to create a meaningful life. This journey is not linear. It will have setbacks and challenges, but every step taken in awareness and intention brings you closer to a life of authenticity and fulfillment. Remember, the future is not a distant horizon, but a canvas waiting to be painted with the brushstrokes of your choices. Choose to paint with courage, with love, with meaning. And in doing so, you will transform your fear of tomorrow from a source of paralysis into a springboard for growth. I have learned that the human spirit is both fragile and indomitable. When confronted by the fear of tomorrow, it may tremble, yet it can also rise with a strength that defies the harshest conditions. This strength is not a gift bestowed upon the few, but a potential lying dormant within us all, waiting to be awakened by our choices. The question is never if fear will come, but how we will respond to it. Will we allow it to consume us, or will we harness it to propel us toward a deeper understanding of ourselves and our purpose? When I was confined to the camps, I witnessed moments of profound despair alongside instances of remarkable hope. What distinguished those who endured was not the absence of fear, but the presence of meaning. Meaning became a shield and a sword against the despair that sought to engulf them, and a sword to cut through the veil of suffering and find a path forward. This duality reveals a profound truth. That meaning is not passive. It is an active force, born of engagement and choice. The fear of tomorrow calls us to engage, not merely to survive, but to live fully. It beckons us to become architects of our destiny, crafting purpose from uncertainty. This crafting requires that we look inward, confronting our fears, hopes, and values with radical honesty. It demands that we ask ourselves, what is truly important? What am I willing to stand for, even in the face of fear? In answering these questions, we begin to weave the fabric of a meaningful life, one that holds together even when the threads of certainty unravel. I urge you to take up this challenge. Embrace the fear of tomorrow as a teacher, not an enemy. Let it reveal to you the depths of your courage, the breadth of your compassion, and the resilience of your spirit. For it is in this embrace that transformation occurs. It is where the human soul finds its most profound expression. So when fear whispers its doubts, answer with your commitment to meaning. When uncertainty looms, respond with your resolve to live authentically. And when despair threatens, stand firm in the knowledge that your life, with all its imperfections and unknowns, holds infinite worth. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the world is still and the mind is free to wander, I often reflect on the nature of fear and meaning. The fear of tomorrow can feel like a vast ocean, stretching endlessly before us, threatening to pull us under its waves. Yet, beneath its surface lies a current of possibility, of potential, of growth. This current is not always easy to navigate. It requires courage to face the unknown, to swim against the tides of doubt and anxiety. But it is in this very struggle that the human spirit finds its greatest expression. I have learned that meaning is found not in the absence of fear, but in our response to it. It is forged in the moments when we choose to act despite uncertainty, when we decide that our purpose is greater than our anxiety. When I was imprisoned, my days were filled with fear. Fear of pain, of loss, of death. But I discovered that even in those conditions, I could find meaning. It was in the love I felt for my family, the hope for a future beyond the barbed wire, the small acts of kindness shared among prisoners. These sources of meaning became anchors, grounding me in a reality that transcended my immediate suffering. They reminded me that while I could not control what would happen tomorrow, I could control how I met it. This realization is the foundation of the freedom that fear cannot take away. The freedom to choose one's attitude, one's purpose, one's path. I invite you to consider your own fear of tomorrow through this lens. What anchors do you hold? What sources of meaning sustain you when the future feels uncertain? These questions are not meant to diminish the reality of fear, but to empower you to see beyond it. To recognize that fear, while real, is not all-powerful. That within you lies a wellspring of meaning waiting to be tapped. This wellspring is your strength. It is your light in the darkness. And as you draw from it, you transform fear from a barrier into a bridge that carries you from anxiety to courage, from despair to hope. So when the fear of tomorrow arises, greet it as a companion on your journey. Listen to its message, and then step forward with intention. For in doing so, you claim your humanity. You affirm your capacity to create meaning in a world that is by nature uncertain. The fear of tomorrow often feels like a vast emptiness, a void that threatens to swallow our hopes whole. Yet within this void lies the hidden seed of meaning, a seed that only grows when we confront the uncertainty and refuse to turn away. This seed is fragile, yes, but also incredibly resilient. It is nourished by our courage to face the unknown, by our commitment to something greater than ourselves. I have learned that the human spirit is like a candle flickering in the wind, easily threatened, yet capable of casting light even in the darkest night. That light is our meaning. It is what guides us through the storm, what gives us the strength to rise each day despite the shadows that loom. In my darkest hours, I found solace in the simple truth that though I could not control the circumstances of my life, I could control my response to them. This choice, to find meaning despite suffering, became my lifeline. It tethered me to hope when all else seemed lost. Meaning is not found in the absence of pain, but in the courage to endure it. It is the quiet voice that whispers, "This too shall pass," and the fierce resolve that says, "I will not be defined by my fear." I invite you now to turn toward your own fear of tomorrow with gentle curiosity. What does it reveal about your values? What truths about yourself does it uncover? When we lean into this fear, we open the door to transformation. We shift from being prisoners of anxiety to architects of meaning. We begin to see the future not as a threat, but as a canvas, waiting for us to paint it with the colors of our choice. This process is neither quick nor easy. It demands patience, resilience, and the willingness to embrace discomfort. But it is in this journey that we discover the depths of our strength and the expansiveness of our spirit. Remember, the fear you feel is a sign of your engagement with life, a testament to your desire to live meaningfully. It is not a weakness, but a doorway. Step through it with courage, and as you do, know that you are not alone. We are all travelers on this uncertain path, bound by the shared quest for meaning in a world that offers no guarantees. May your journey be one of awakening, one in which the fear of tomorrow becomes the very soil from which your deepest purpose grows. There is a profound truth in the human experience. The future, with all its unknowns, holds both promise and peril. It is this dual nature that stirs within us the fear of tomorrow. Yet this fear is not a sign of weakness, but an indication of our capacity to hope, to long for a life filled with purpose and connection. In the darkest times of my life, when hope seemed like a distant star, I clung to the belief that meaning could be found in even the smallest moments. A shared glance, a remembered song, the silent prayer whispered in the stillness of night. These became my anchors. Meaning, I realized, is not something we stumble upon accidentally. It is something we actively create through our attitudes, our choices, and our relationships. Even when external circumstances are harsh and unforgiving, the inner world of meaning remains accessible to us. The fear of tomorrow challenges us to engage with this inner world. It asks us, what do you hold sacred? What are you willing to fight for? What legacy do you wish to leave behind? These questions are difficult, but they are also liberating. They invite us to step out of passive existence and into active authorship of our lives. When we accept this invitation, we transform fear from a paralyzing force into a motivating one. Fear becomes a compass pointing us toward what matters most. I have witnessed this transformation in countless individuals, people who faced unimaginable suffering yet chose to respond with dignity, love, and meaning. Their lives, though marked by hardship, shone brightly because of their commitment to purpose. You too have this power. You can choose to face your fear of tomorrow not with resignation but with resolve. You can choose to see uncertainty as a canvas for your meaning, not a prison of despair. This choice is the essence of freedom, the freedom to live authentically, even in the shadow of fear. So I urge you, when the fear of tomorrow arises, do not turn away. Instead, embrace it as a call to awaken. Let it remind you of your humanity and your capacity to create meaning. In this embrace, you will find strength beyond measure and hope that transcends circumstance. Fear of tomorrow is the crucible in which meaning is forged. It tests our resolve, challenges our beliefs, and invites us to redefine what it means to live fully. It is in the face of this fear that we discover the resilience of the human spirit. A spirit that refuses to be extinguished even in the darkest of nights. When I was confined in the camps, I saw men and women who, despite unbearable suffering, held onto their purpose with fierce determination. They understood that meaning was not a gift bestowed by fortune, but a choice made in the depths of adversity. This choice gave them strength to endure, hope to persevere, and a reason to keep waking each day. It was a testament to the power of the human will, a power that transcends circumstance and defines our very existence. I have come to believe that meaning is the cornerstone of human freedom. It is the light that guides us through uncertainty, the anchor that holds us steady in the storm. But meaning is not static. Meaning is not static. It evolves as we grow, change, and confront new challenges. The fear of tomorrow can be a catalyst for this evolution, pushing us to reevaluate our values and recommit to what truly matters. I encourage you to see your fear not as a barrier, but as a doorway, a passage into deeper self-awareness and greater purpose. Ask yourself, what does this fear reveal about my priorities? How can I use it to live more authentically? In these questions lie the seeds of transformation. By answering them honestly, you begin to chart a course toward a life rich with meaning. Remember, the path will not always be easy. There will be moments of doubt, pain, and uncertainty. But each step you take with intention brings you closer to the freedom that comes from living in alignment with your true self. So when tomorrow feels daunting, stand firm in your commitment to meaning. Let your fear be a companion, not a captor. And know that through this journey, you are part of a timeless human story. One of courage, resilience, and the unyielding search for purpose. The human experience is marked by the constant tension between certainty and uncertainty, between hope and fear. The fear of tomorrow is a natural response to this tension, an echo of our awareness of life's fragility and the unknown paths ahead. Yet, this fear, when met with courage and reflection, becomes the soil in which meaning can take root. I recall the moments in my life when the future was obscured by shadows, when each day felt like a battle against despair. It was in these moments that I learned the profound lesson that meaning is not something waiting to be discovered out there, but something we create within ourselves. It is the light we kindle in the darkest night. This light is fueled by the questions we dare to ask ourselves. What is my purpose? What values will I uphold, even when everything else is stripped away? What legacy will my choices leave? What legacy will my choices leave? Facing the fear of tomorrow requires us to answer these questions with honesty and resolve. It challenges us to step beyond comfort and certainty into the realm of authentic living. It asks us to embrace vulnerability as a path to strength. In embracing this fear, I have found that we do not become victims of circumstance but active participants in our own story. We shape our destiny through the meaning we assign to our experiences. This is not a passive acceptance but a dynamic engagement with life's challenges. It is a choice to respond with courage and hope, even when the outcome is unknown. I invite you to join me in this journey of meaning-making, to see fear not as a prison but as a gateway, to recognize that within you lies the power to transform uncertainty into opportunity. Remember, the fear of tomorrow is not a sentence but an invitation. An invitation to live deeply, to love fully, and to create a life that resonates with your deepest truths. As you walk this path, may you find strength in your vulnerability, clarity in your purpose, and peace in your courage. The fear of tomorrow, though often seen as a burden, holds within it a paradoxical gift, the gift of awareness. It reminds us that our time is limited, that our choices carry weight, and that every moment is an opportunity to create meaning. This awareness can be unsettling, but it is also a profound call to live authentically. I have observed that those who embrace this call, who lean into their fears rather than retreat from them, find a resilience that transforms their experience of life. They become like oaks weathering the storm, rooted deeply in their values, yet flexible enough to bend with the winds of change. This resilience is not born of denial but of acceptance. Acceptance of life's impermanence and the uncertainty that accompanies it. It is the recognition that while we cannot control all that happens, we can control how we respond. In the camps, I witnessed this acceptance in the eyes of those who chose hope over despair, meaning over nihilism. Their strength was not in their circumstances but in their inner attitude. I encourage you to cultivate this attitude in your own life. When fear of tomorrow arises, greet it with compassion. Do not judge yourself for feeling vulnerable or uncertain. Instead, use it as a mirror reflecting your deepest values and aspirations. Ask yourself, what does this fear want me to understand about myself? How can it guide me toward a more meaningful existence? By engaging with these questions, you open the door to transformation. You shift from being a passive recipient of fear to an active creator of meaning. This shift is the essence of freedom. It is the realization that no matter what tomorrow holds, your life can be rich with purpose. So, take heart in the knowledge that fear is not the enemy but a signpost. Follow it to discover the meaning that awaits on the other side. And as you do, remember that you are part of a larger human story, one of struggle, resilience, and the enduring quest for significance. The fear of tomorrow is an echo of our mortal awareness, a reminder that life is a fleeting gift, fragile and uncertain. But this echo need not resound as a note of despair. It can be a call to awaken, to live with intention, to find purpose not despite the uncertainty but because of it. I have witnessed how those who embrace this paradox find a profound freedom. The freedom to choose their attitude, to craft meaning where chaos seems to reign. It is not the circumstances that define us, but the stance we take toward them. When imprisoned, stripped of all external control, I realized that the inner world remained sovereign. My thoughts, my will, my ability to choose meaning could never be taken away. In that realization, I found a sanctuary no prison could confine. This sanctuary is open to all who dare to seek it. It demands courage, yes, but it also offers solace, a peace that transcends the fear of tomorrow. Ask yourself now, what meaning can I create today that will sustain me through the unknown days ahead? What values will anchor me when the future is uncertain? These questions are the keys to unlocking a life lived fully, deeply, authentically. The fear of tomorrow, then, becomes a teacher, guiding us to the essence of what it means to be human, to hope, to endure, to love, and to create meaning in the face of all uncertainty. And now, as we stand at the threshold of what tomorrow may bring, I ask you to carry this truth with you. The fear you feel is not your enemy. It is the herald of meaning, the signpost pointing toward your deepest purpose. It beckons you to rise, to choose courage over surrender, meaning over despair. It reminds you that your life, with all its uncertainties, is a canvas upon which you alone may paint your legacy. The fear of tomorrow is not merely a feeling but a profound dialogue between our present self and the unknown future. It is an invitation to reckon with the essence of our existence, to face the reality that time is finite and that every moment is both precious and fleeting. This reckoning can shake us to our core, forcing us to question the narratives we have built about security, control, and permanence. It calls us to surrender illusions and to awaken to the fluid nature of life. Yet, within this upheaval lies a remarkable potential. The potential to live more deeply, to love more fully, and to create meaning that endures beyond the uncertainty. Meaning is the bridge that connects the present to the future, the past to possibility. It is what gives coherence to the chaos and direction to the wandering soul. In my experience, meaning is not something we find by accident or by passivity. It is actively forged in the crucible of our choices, attitudes, and commitments. When fear arises, it can either confine us within walls of anxiety or propel us towards self-discovery and growth. The difference lies in our response, in our ability to choose meaning in spite of fear. I invite you now to reflect deeply. What fears about tomorrow hold you captive? What truths do they reveal about your desires and your values? By facing these fears with honesty, you open a door to liberation. You begin to transform the unknown from a source of dread into a canvas for creativity. This transformation is not sudden nor easy. It is a journey marked by setbacks and revelations, by moments of doubt and bursts of clarity. The fear of tomorrow, in its essence, calls us to confront the impermanence of life and the ultimate mystery of what lies beyond. It unsettles us because it strips away the illusions of control and certainty we cling to, revealing the fragile and unpredictable nature of existence. Yet, within this revelation lies an opportunity, a chance to awaken to the fullness of being, to recognize that life's true meaning is not found in permanence, but in the very act of living with purpose amid impermanence. I've come to understand that this fear, when embraced, is a gateway to freedom. It is a mirror reflecting back our deepest desires and fears, our potential and our limitations. Facing it requires courage, the courage to accept vulnerability, to acknowledge our mortality, and to engage with life authentically. This courage transforms fear from a source of paralysis into a source of motivation. It ignites a fire within us to seek what matters most, to connect deeply, and to live intentionally. In the concentration camps, those who endured were not those who denied fear, but those who embraced it, using it as a compass to guide their choices. They found meaning in acts of kindness, in memories of loved ones, in faith, and in the hope of a future beyond suffering. Their example teaches us that meaning is not contingent upon circumstances, but upon the attitude we adopt toward them. You hold the same power, the power to choose meaning in every moment, regardless of fear or uncertainty. This power is the essence of human freedom. It allows you to shape your destiny not by controlling the future, but by controlling your response to it. So, when the fear of tomorrow rises, do not seek to escape it. Instead, engage with it as a teacher. Listen to the lessons it offers. Let it illuminate your values and awaken your purpose. In this engagement, you will find a strength you never knew you had, and a meaning that transcends all uncertainty. In the midst of uncertainty, the human spirit searches for a foothold, something solid upon which to stand. The fear of tomorrow shakes that foundation, threatening to uproot us from the ground of certainty we so desperately seek. Yet, this trembling is not a sign of weakness. It is a signal of life itself pulsating within us. It reminds us that we are alive, that we have the capacity to feel deeply, to hope fiercely, and to choose meaning even when the path ahead is shrouded in mist. I have learned that meaning is not discovered like a hidden treasure lying buried beneath the surface of our lives. Rather, it is created through our responses, our attitudes toward the circumstances that life presents. When I was imprisoned, I could not control the horrors around me, but I could control how I met them. This control, however limited, became my liberation. Meaning became the lens through which I viewed suffering, transforming it from a senseless affliction into a challenge to be met with dignity and purpose. This transformation is the heart of human freedom, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. It is a freedom no one can take away, No prison, no fear, no uncertainty can strip it from us if we hold it fast. So I ask you now, what will you choose when fear knocks at your door? Will you open it to despair or to the possibility of meaning? This choice is yours alone, but you do not have to walk it in isolation. The human spirit is communal, and in sharing our fears and hopes, we find strength. Together we can face the fear of tomorrow and transform it into a catalyst for growth and purpose. Let this be the moment you commit to living not in the shadow of fear, but in the light of meaning. Because it is not the certainty of tomorrow that defines us, but the courage to live meaningfully today. But it is a journey worth taking, for it leads to a life that is authentically yours. A life that honors your unique gifts, your struggles, and your triumphs. And as you walk this path, you may come to understand that the fear of tomorrow is not a barrier but a catalyst, a force that calls you to awaken to your deepest self and to the profound meaning waiting to be embraced. Do not shrink from the unknown. Step boldly into it, armed with the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, meaning can be found, created, and embraced. Your response to the fear of tomorrow is your ultimate freedom. The freedom to define who you are, to shape the story you tell, to leave an imprint that outlasts time. This is the power that lies within you, the light that no shadow can extinguish. So go forth with resolve, live with intention, and let the meaning you forge today be the beacon that guides you through every uncertainty that awaits. For in this journey, you were never truly lost, only on the path to discovering the fullness of your own humanity.